You're listening to Served Up, a podcast that features inspiring beverage professionals and topic experts that share their passions through meaningful conversations. I'm your host, Bridget Albert, also known as the Market Fresh Mixologist, an industry mentor with decades of experience. Grab a cocktail and sit back. Let's learn how we can make a positive impact in our industry. Hey y'all, it's Bridget here. Get ready to mix things up in this exciting interview with Amy Lukken, the joyful force behind Tito's Vodka and their official Joyologist. Amy brings a unique blend of fun and passion to the world of spirits, and she's here to share how joy plays a key role in everything Tito's does, from crafting memorable cocktails to spreading happiness through community initiatives. Amy's insights are as refreshing as a perfectly shaken drink. So grab yourself your favorite Tito's Vodka cocktail and enjoy the show. Amy, welcome to Served Up. It's an absolute joy to have you on the show today.
Hi, Bridget. It's a pleasure being here.
Now, before we jump into it, I think is the most incredible title that any company can give to anyone, which is Joyologist. Let's just go back, and I would love our listeners to understand what brought you into the beverage world.
You know, that's a great question. Tito Beverage himself brought me into the beverage world. So my background was in the textiles industry for about 28 years. So I was working for a publicly held company back in Atlanta, Georgia, traveled the world for them. And then I was a joyologist at my previous company, and Tito Beverage had known my work in designing and driving purpose-driven cultures. So he said, hey, why don't you come on board? And I was like, oh, I got a good gig over here. And he said, Amy, Georgia textiles, vodka, Austin. And I was like, yeah, you got a point there. So off I came to the beverage industry.
About 10 years ago. Okay.
Yeah.
So when you were growing up, did the younger Amy think to herself, like, I'm going to be a joyologist? Or did you want to be like an astronaut, a teacher, like, a doctor? I don't know, the first female president. What were you thinking?
You know, I think, Bridget, that I've been in training to be a joyologist all of my life. Really, seriously. It had some... my upbringing, and believe it or not, I had several near-death experiences starting at age 5. And so those near-death experiences really showed me the other side of the coin of, pain and trauma. And as a child, I was always leaning towards, how do I get away from this and start to drive towards actually joy? How do I become, out of the path that I was in of these weird experiences? And then my, the joyology was really self-designed in the corporate world. So my work led me into, it's kind of a wild road, but I climbed the grease pole of corporate America. And as a female, I was one of the first vice presidents of a very large company, about 6,000 employees. And it just... I made it to the very top, and I realized, wow, we're doing business all the wrong ways. We were focused so much on numbers. And I was, my background in studies are in international business, behavioral science, and psychology. So I was blending all these things together. And so, the bottom line is I, at the top of this company, said we need to revisit how we're looking at people. And how do we really grow our people from the inside out? And so people started calling me the joyologist because I was really focused on the heart of the human while in business, which actually, our company grew because of that type of structure. So and then I began to, design a curriculum around joyology, et cetera, of how to be better humans. So that's a long answer, but a joyologist in training since 5, and then began practicing it in business as an adult.
Wow. How do you define joy?
To me, joy is a not afterthought, but the feeling comes from certain acts of behavior, right? So when I give love to someone else, I feel joy. When I feel love back, I feel joy. And so to me, it's an emotion that comes from our behaviors.
And, how does joy in your world really influence your daily activities?
I think it's the driving force. I think if you say daily activities, we spend 75% of our time at work, about some of us more. And if we're at work that much, we need to find joy in what we're doing at 75% of our life. So to me, it's, I oversee the philanthropy for the company. I founded our Love Tito's division 10 years ago. And so to me, it's staying focused on really, I want to say kind of a life of service. We're selling alcohol, but we also have the ability to help others in many, many ways. So I think for me, helping others brings me joy.
And that's what helped you form Love Tito's. You have such a big fan base in Tito's. So many people love Tito's, so much so that they just even forget it's a vodka sometimes. They just know that they just love it because y'all are doing some amazing things. So can you talk to what and how, first of all, what Love Tito's is and how and why you formed it?
Yeah. You know what? I just love your expression when you say the word love because it's so big. And that's really, really how we founded this part of the company. It's this simple and it's such a cool story. So I come from this publicly traded company. Tito says, come over. And he says, I want you to head up my philanthropy. And so I said, great. And so I come over and I'm first day on the job and I'm looking around for the philanthropy department and there was none. And I'm like, he said, hey, look, we've been doing charity events. We've been giving away product for years. And so it's time now to really, let's get serious about this. So first week on the job, I'm sitting in the room with the head of marketing at the time. And he said, I want to do an experiment. I want to see if we put love out into the world, would love actually come back to us? And I thought, I've landed at the right place, right? Here's the leader of the company wanting to express love in a business world, right? And again, imagine coming from this publicly traded company, all about Wall Street, performing quarterly, et cetera. This guy is a geophysicist. He's a geologist. He loves experiments. So he said, let's try this out and see what happens. And so he stands up to leave the meeting. And I said, well, how do you want me to do this? And he turns back to this big, grin. If you know Tito Beverage's big Texas accent, he goes, oh, I don't know. That's why I hired you. You figure it out. And so the basis of this beginning was all about love. That was the experiment in 2015 in February. So that's what we did. And so, I knew enough about how to stir in the right ingredients for purpose-driven cultures. And the main ingredient was love because people love the product. They love every time they say, oh my gosh, I love Tito's or I love this. And Tito Beverage was saying, let's put love out there. And it just made sense. So instead of doing monthly letters, I would write love letters to the salespeople. And I always signed it, Love Amy. And so we then moved into Love Tito's. So it just made sense. That's how it started.
What are some of those philanthropy efforts that have come from Love Tito's?
Well, so it started off small, and then we built from it because we were doing a couple hundred charity events in the beginning when I started, and that was, in-kind product donations. And then after that, we designed what's called the Joy Bucket, where we gave a budget to our employees to really go and support what means something to them. So Tito said, find your passion and wrap a Tito's label around it, which meant whatever means something to you, go out and support that cause. So, if someone in Tampa, their mother had died of cancer, she gets to go and support the local cancer drives. And then she gets to build it into her business. One gal, a great story, years and years ago, there were stray dogs that would wander up to the distillery. And Beth, had a big heart for stray animals. So she would start saving the lives, and she'd get them spayed and neutered, find homes for them. One thing led to another. And we said, Beth, find your passion and wrap Tito's label around it. So she designed what's called Vodka for Dog People. So now, we support thousands of, organizations throughout the country. We do yappy hours every time, you bring your dog into an account. We have a Tito's Yappy Hour. Money goes back to the local Humane Society. So it's this kind of mentality of find your passion for the employees, and then we support our employees' passion to do that. So that's kind of the genesis of that culture. Started in that way, and then it just grew and grew, and it's in really giving is in every single department of the company. So it's, we don't have a CSR department, so to speak. It's in every person in the company, but there's multiple areas of how we're doing that, from our, 14 acres farm is another area of how we give back to our employees. And so we always have to start at home first, and then practice, and then we roll it out to the next level, which would be our distributors and retail partners, and then to our consumers. So we make sure we get everybody to jump on board and help us to do what's good in the community. So that's it.
Such a cool story, and you really are doing the work, and Tito's is really doing the work. And if we all did the work, what a better place the world would be. It's so simple. When you think, I know the work's not simple, but the concept is, right? It's not overthinking. It's not a bunch of spreadsheets. It's just being kind and just putting out what you love into the world. And then it's reciprocal. You mentioned 14 Acres Farms. For our listeners that are super curious about Tito's vodka, maybe they've never tried Tito's, right? It's right. Possible. Can you explain to them what 14 Acres Farm is? How did it come to be, and why is it important to your teams?
Yeah. So about, 6 or 7 years ago, Tito walked into my office and said, I don't think we're doing enough in the world. And I was like, oh my gosh, we're doing, like 5,000 charities that we're supporting and driving missions. And he said, no, let's rethink this. And he started talking about, food. And he said, let's look at all the different ways that we can help people with health issues. And so we looked at our own employees, and he started to tear up. I mean, he loves his employees so much, Bridget. He talks about when I'm in vacation, he can't wait to get back to his employees to hang out. So he started looking at the distillery, and our distillery's in a food desert. And he said, Amy, let food be thy medicine, and we've got to help our employees live longer, healthier lives. And I said, all right, what are your thoughts? He said, well, let's build them a garden. So I thought, that's great. And then instead of building a garden, we built a farm. And it's literally 14 acres. So we've got about 76 raised concrete beds that are, 5 feet wide by 8 feet long. And then over 30 tunnels, which are, greenhouses, all making clean, fresh or food for our employees. And we've got 7 full-time farmers that are on staff. So we grow this food simply for our distillery employees, and they twice a week have a farmer's market. And they all come in to the distillery in this adorable, cute, vibrant market where they get to have the pick of the vegetables and stuff their brown paper bags to take home to their families. So we're not just feeding them; we're feeding their families. And so every time they come home without a bag of vegetables, their kids come back screaming and saying, "Hey, where are our vegetables?" So it's really, we're starting to see a different. The conversations are changed. They get to come together and talk about recipes, and they get to come together and talk about what they're doing differently and eating differently, and how, if their health has changed. So, I think the last time you and I saw each other, someone asked me, how do we measure our CSR work? And I laughed and I said, we don't really have a CSR. We measure everything in smiles and laughter and tears.
Yeah, that's
so that
really incredible. Really, really incredible. I want to shift gears for just a minute. Before we started the podcast, we were talking just a little bit about your coaching, just briefly.
Yeah.
Can you speak to your approach of coaching, and especially coaching women? Our industry is definitely changing. I don't believe that we're there yet, seeing the diversity maybe that we should. And I don't believe that we see enough women in leadership who are absolutely qualified for the positions, but a lot of times get looked over. And so can you talk to your approach of coaching, and in particular, coaching women?
Yeah. Background is in business, behavioral sciences, clinical psychology. So I first always tell whoever I'm in a session with or coaching that I specialize on the windshield and not the rearview mirror. So anything that they want to talk about past ailments, trauma, et cetera, things that not working, that, I can direct them to the right person to go to. But if they're looking at focusing on where they're going through the windshield and the possibilities and what their strengths and talents are to help them get there, then I'm their person. So I always start there. And with women in particular, there seems to be a pattern. And the pattern is it's difficult for women to find their voice. And we hear this, find your voice a lot these days. I also hear a pattern that, I'm never invited to the meeting. And I ask them, why do you need to be invited? Why can't you just show up? Why can't you just open the door and take your seat at the table and let people know that I need to be here, and this is why I need to be here? Now, of course, I wouldn't just pop into the bottling meeting because I wouldn't have any, I have no idea how to bottle. So I wouldn't show up to those meetings. But the meetings where I bring great benefit and assets and talent, then I really help women learn how to sit at the table all by themselves. Because one thing that I believe in, and I tell over and over, is design your future or someone else will. And most of the time, we don't like the future that someone else has designed for us. So we sit back and bitch and moan and complain that they don't hear me or no one listens to me. And I'm like, you've got to really stand up and find your own seat at the table. So, I would say that's the biggest thing is get a clear picture to the ladies of leadership of where you want to go. What's that future look like? How are you going to get there? And then fight and claw your way to that table.
And sometimes it is a fight, and sometimes there is some surprise. Like there's welcoming, and so glad that you're here. And how crazy was it that we didn't invite you in the first place? I know I've experienced that in my career, being a very creative person and always having to come up with unusual solutions for the company that I work with. I work with, and I don't say for, because I feel like we hold hands in partnership with what we do. When you go in with a creative solution, I think especially as a female to the company that you're working for, you don't want to be brushed off or seen as silly.
Right, right. Or emotional, right?
or emotional.
Yeah. And I think if we look at it, women really are built for adversity.
Mm-hmm. I want to get back to that human to human idea, which we don't always see in corporate America. We are humans working for a corporation. However, it's so much sometimes driven by the data, the spreadsheets, the technology versus that human to human conversations that we need to have first. We need all those other things. Absolutely. I'm not discounting that. But a lot of times that comes before that human connection. Can we talk about, especially in corporate America, why that human connection is so important?
I think when you're describing spreadsheets and numbers and things like that, that's how we do business.
Mm-hmm.
But what we do it with is what's important. And what we do it with is our full self, is a full 360 picture. It is the mind, soul, and heart. You can't leave when you enter the workforce, when you go into your office, you're not just coming in with a head, a logical, intellectual side. You're actually bringing your full body. You're bringing your heart. You're bringing your spirit, your energy. And so we have to, as a business, recognize what the full self looks like and how to tap into it and how to grow all parts to the body and the human. And so for me, it gets back to talent in the workplace, what your natural talents are, your natural gifts. And those show up between the ages of 3 and 9 years old.
Hmm.
And after that, because if any of us that have children, we can detect one child doing something more unique over the other child. And those are these natural gifts that start to arise. And so it's our job to look at those gifts as parents, develop them, help develop them. And then when we get into the workforce, those natural talents and gifts are still showing up at age 5, 15, 50, 85. And when we put the match the talent for the role, and then we develop that with the skills, knowledge, and experience. We take the natural talent, which cannot be taught, and then we look at skills, knowledge, and experience, which are things that can be taught, and we put those together. Now you've got a full package of a human, right? Not to mention you bring in the heart and spirit in.
Yeah, I love that. And I think that also ties back to authenticity.
Yeah.
Can we talk about authenticity and why, especially today in today's world, it doesn't matter, if you're in the liquor industry, it doesn't matter, right? But how bringing your full self into a space, how important that is, not just to the company but to yourself.
Yeah, I think let's look at it the opposite way. Let's look at just you and me, Bridget. If I'm not being authentic, it takes a lot of work to be someone that I'm not. So that's a lot of energy that I'm giving to being inauthentic. It takes less energy just to be exactly who you are. And it's so much more freeing, right? And when we are who we are and we can relax and our shoulders drop and our breathing is calmer, we're able to give to the world so much more in a creative way. So let's just start with that it takes so much more energy to be somebody else. And there's only one you out there. So there's actually statistically, there's only 1 in 33, almost 34 million people who are identical to your natural talents and natural gifts. So you're very unique to start off with. So if you were to take authenticity in business and what that looks like, the consumer today, the younger generation, their bullshit meter is so much more intact and sharper than previous generations. So they're looking today at corporations and organizations who are real, who are themselves. And I think as a nation, we've got to really get back to being authentic and finding out who we are. Authenticity is really, really important in today's world.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I think that if you're not authentic to yourself, what you just said is so spot on the energy that it takes to try to be like somebody else, just to think that, to be that person that you think everyone will gravitate towards, that you think you need to be. The energy to do that is exhausting, and you will burn out, and you won't have that longevity in your industry.
Yeah.
I always feel like my personal longevity is because I'm Bridget.
Yeah.
Sometimes you don't know what to do with me, but that's fine. I don't try to be anybody else. I don't know how to be anybody else.
And
but if I tried, I think I would be tired and I wouldn't have the long career that I've had. So what you said, it just makes so much sense.
So think about what you just said. I am Bridget. I don't know how to be anyone else. Mm-hmm. And that's why I've had such a longevity in my career. So that right there says, being authentic, you have longevity. You're able to sustain longer. And I would imagine you're probably a little bit happier.
I'm super happy.
Yeah. Yeah.
I get challenges too. Don't get me wrong, but the challenges that I overcome is in a more creative way.
Yeah.
And the only ways that I know how to overcome them, it's not normal. It's what it is.
I love that. Look at how many people you draw to you because you are happy. So if you're telling me you've been authentic, that's the only way you know how to be. You are happy. People are drawn to authentic people and happiness. That's just how it is. Think of the people that are not authentic and that are not maybe as happy. Do you come running to them right away and can't wait to be around them, huh?
Right. And so let's bring this authenticity back to Tito's mission.
I've been reading a lot about, success and et cetera. And all research goes back to the same point, which is it wasn't about degrees or, whatever. It had to go back. It went back to grit, determination. And this guy had more grit, still does, more grit and determination than I've ever seen anybody to have. And I think that's what's interesting about today's generation is really understanding what grit means and what really being determined means,
Yeah. I love that. I'm a mom, right? And I think and my daughter is in college right now. But if she would have said, Mom, I don't think college is for me, that would have been okay. Yeah. If she was determined to take a different path. I didn't go to college. I am not college material. I hated school. Okay. Yeah. But here I am. Yeah. And so I do feel like grit is key to success, whether you are a brilliant scientist or just somebody who, school is not their jam.
That's right.
To get them through.
Because you've met people with lots of degrees with no grit.
Right.
And so, and you've met people with lots of grit like yourself. I barely got into college. I really barely got out. And so I think you and I have a shared grit and a great attitude. That's another thing.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. Can we talk about that? Because that's a game changer, right?
You know what? Can I tell you something? My first couple of weeks at Tito's, he wanted me to go out and travel. And so I traveled. And of course, I'm always studying behaviors, right? And observing. And so I came back and I said to him, Tito, I'm detecting a real pattern in your people. I mean, like strong pattern. Mm-hmm. He said, yeah. And I said, so what's your hiring practice? He said, well, you only have to have two things to work here. I said, okay. He said, you got to have one, a great attitude. And second is you just got to get your shit done. And I started laughing. And I said, yeah, but come on, what else? He said, no, that's it. And that was exactly what I was detecting. Every person had such a great attitude, so nice, so kind, always wanting to help you. And they were very high achievers. And that was that you got to get your stuff done piece.
Yeah.
You had to be a hustler, but you had to have a great attitude. And I love talking about mindsets and great attitudes.
Yeah, it'll take you far because it's so much easier to have a rotten attitude. It can be just so much easier, right? Just to fall into that. pity party. It's so much easier and probably more self-gratifying. Like just to...
Oh, yeah. Listen, people ask me, can you teach a great attitude? And I said, sure you can. It's actually a practice. And it's a combo, right? Here's your joyologist, psychologist, behavioral scientist coming out, which is it's a practice of what you focus on expands. So if I wake up and I start focusing on, oh, I just feel so stiff and I don't want to get out of bed. And so the more I focus on that, I don't feel good or I feel, crappy or whatnot. That actually will expand. Or if you were to focus on, I smell the best coffee in the neighborhood right in my kitchen. I cannot wait to get to that mug. And right now I'm seeing you grin because your whole body language just changed by the smell and smell of that coffee that may not even be cooking right now for you or being made, but you know what I'm talking about. Yeah. So shifting your mindset and your focus helps change your attitude. And then you have to practice that. So it's what you focus on expands and then turn it into a practice. Remember, Bridget, doctors practice medicine and attorneys practice law. They weren't born that way.
Right. That's probably the best advice we've been given on this show. I think that's going to help a lot of people. I mean that sincerely. I think that that's going to help a lot of people.
Good. I hope so.
Yeah. Yeah. Because I think a lot of folks tend to get stuck in a rut.
Sure. I tell you something, it's easy today. Every single headline reads divisiveness.
Oh, yes.
And so if you begin to put that in your practice daily, guess what will happen?
Mm-hmm.
You will have a divisive attitude and you'll start to bicker and debate and try to win over your friends and family of today's politics. And that's just not good. It's not healthy. So be careful what you're focusing on is what I
focus on the Olympics, folks.
There you go. Oh my gosh.
I am focusing on the Olympics. I am turned off the news.
Isn't that the best? You know what? How in the world do all the countries come together for 2 weeks and put down their swords? And they're also supportive of one another, even opposing competitors. They're so supportive. And it's like, if we can do this for 2 weeks, come on, guys, we can do it with everything. So I agree. Turn on the Olympics.
And start following some of the Olympians. I mean, I know we're going way off track here, but start following some of the Olympians on like TikTok and on Instagram and see how joyful they are and see the things that they're doing. And it's so fun.
I mean, that is exactly what we're talking about. Maybe we should do a podcast on joyology.
Can we please?
We just really, it's again, just watch the Olympics.
Watch the Olympics. Your blood pressure will be so much better.
That's right. That's the answer today. I love that.
It is the answer today. I want to just shift it back a little bit to some of the projects that Tito's works on and invests in that you had mentioned. We were at a volunteers event, which is how I met Amy. If you're not familiar with volunteers, it is our volunteer arm here at Southern Glazers Wine and Spirits. And we bring together just loads of our volunteers from across the country to learn from some incredible speakers like Amy, and then to also go out in the community and to do some great work and to learn from one another. And Amy, during that, you had mentioned, some of the more innovative projects that Tito's invests in, because at the end of the day, Tito is also a scientist. Yeah. Can we talk about that?
Sure.
I was truly impressed.
There are different levels. Tito has always said that his mom told him when he was little, no matter what, always make the world a better place. And he just grins because he really does believe that. So we're into a number of different levels of how we really make the world a better place, right? So one level is kind of that ground level that we let the employees support missions that are really making the world a better place in a number of ways. So there's, 10,000 plus missions that we're making a difference in. And so that could be, at that level, Miracle Foundation was a Texas gal from Austin that was working for a local radio station that she went to India and went into an orphanage and just was appalled at how the children were being treated. So she wanted to change, to clean up the orphanages in India. So we stepped in to help her. And now we keep challenging her. And so she went from, making clean places for them to live to now eradicating all orphanages around the world. And so by that, I mean, we said, okay, what if we give you more? What can you do? And she said, well, I'll go to Rome and talk to the Catholics, and I'll get all of their orphanages, and I'll find families for all of those kids. We said, okay, what can you do next? And she said, well, I'll go to the UN. I'll talk to the whole UN and all the world. And so, she continues on. So we keep encouraging that. But that's like at this ground level piece, right? And then we've got the middle level of giving where we call our booster gives or passion projects, which are, a little bit bigger give. And then those could be anywhere that, how do they affect our industry? So there's one of our reps up in New England grew up on Martha's Vineyard. And he watched it was at the time called a gin boom, where the fishermen, that's a big boom, how they get the fish from the water to the dock to the restaurant. And their gin boom had broken down. And it was, during COVID, they didn't have the money to repair it. So therefore, they couldn't get the seafood to the dock, to the restaurants. And so all of our accounts were suffering. The people were suffering. The workers were suffering. So we came in and helped them put this back together, bought them a new boom. Of course, they call it now the Vodka boom. How about that? But so at that point, that's a bigger type give, and we're making a real difference. But it also helped, our own accounts, and it helped our employee there because it was meaningful to his family. So then, then the next level we call cheers, which is that really big higher level where we're, either curing blindness in Africa, where we're pulling plastics out of the ocean around the world, we're preventing asteroids from hitting the Earth. We're into so many really big world-changing projects. And we love to pick where the smaller little guy where no one will help. We love those projects where we can make a big difference. So, they may be world-renowned researchers or scientists, but no one would give them money. But they were the most brilliant on the planet. So we look for those guys, and then we make really big differences in the world with our research and science projects.
I don't know any other company that is, it's astounding. It is, talk about helping like the little guy to let's figure out how to, make sure an asteroid doesn't hit the Earth. Like it's incredible.
Did you hear me, Bridget? I said, oh, by the way, did I tell you we make vodka?
Yeah, I know. And you make vodka. What the heck?
I love, and this is what my legacy is going to be, I hope, is that you started the show off with, what if more companies did this? Mm-hmm. So we just decided to take, the revenue and the profits, instead of putting it back into these big, Wall Street advertising firms, which is not who we are, but how do we put it back into the communities that actually grew us? The people that actually supported our product, how do we help them? Yeah. So could you imagine if every business, small or large, attached some type of goodness to their product or service, how it would change their own local community? So if every business started to begin, their behaviors were, how do I help someone else versus always, focusing on me?
I just have one last question for you, Amy, and that is, if you could give one piece of advice to someone looking to bring more joy into their own life or work, what would it be?
I always make it a habit to go around to anybody that I meet and just say, how can I help you? Just there's something on someone else's desk that they don't want to do for the day. And if you just say, hey, what's that task or chore that you don't want to get done today? How can I help you with it? You will blow them away. You will honor them. You will value them. And more so than anything, you're going to get more joy than you just gave them. Because I always said, I always said, when someone says something really beautiful to me, I say, boomerang, baby, because it comes right back around. So, Bridget, boomerang, baby, you have filled my cup up today by bringing me on your platform here. And I just say thank you from all of us out here. What you're doing matters and it's important. So thank you.
Well, thank you, Amy. Thank you for being on Served Up. And, on behalf of the Served Up team, I would love just to wish you just some great health and a lot of peace. So thank you so much for coming on Served Up. I want you to come back and let's just do a Joyology show.
It would be my absolute honor and joy. So thank you, Bridget.
Thanks for listening. Served Up is brought to you by Southern Glazer's Wine and Spirits. Produced by Zunu.online. Music by We Killed the Lion can be found on Spotify. Make sure to subscribe to be notified of our future Served Up episodes. Cheers.